that comes up. And Paraguay is right here. And you'll notice how green it is in this area. That's because there's a lot of forest left. It's been deforested in all this eastern Paraguay and much of Brazil. So there's very little forest left. So these are really special areas. And then down here, a little bit further down from that little finger is the famous Iberá marshes. And there's also wonderful grasslands as well, native grasslands. And so a lot of special birds there. And then up, we spent some time there, and then we flew across the country into the foothills of the Andes in Salta, and then spent a lot of time up around in the Andes, up to almost 15,000 feet in elevation, and a wide range of landscapes and birds. And then we ended up the trip flying back to Buenos Aires and then going down to the coast and getting some coastal birds and some real surprises that we didn't quite expect to see so close to shore. And so with a wide range of habitats and birds, let's get started. Uh-oh. Okay, so here's Iberá marshlands and grasslands. We were on a boat. We took a little boat ride out into the marshes to get up close to a lot of species. And there's also a little boardwalk here. That's Francis Oliver in the white hat and some other people. And you'll notice palm trees and patches of short tree forests, fairly humid forests and bamboo and pretty thick, and a lot of good birds in there. And here's the native grasslands, which are pretty special. And you'll see patches of forest. Some of the forests in the far horizon are eucalyptus plantations. And you'll find eucalyptus plantations in areas in a lot of lowlands in South America. And I saw quite a few down in parts of South Africa as well, which I was a little surprised about. And of course, those are biological deserts. But there are patches of native forest. And one of the real special birds is the yellow cardinal. It's captured for the pet trade. It's highly endangered. It's gone from most of its range. The pet trade, but also loss of woodland habitat has made this bird basically highly endangered. So this is one of the few places where you can go and get a chance to see one. This is the male. And this is the female, which I think is a little smarter looking bird. Not surprising. And another special bird here is a black and white monjita. And monjitas are in the flycatcher family. Doesn't really look like a flycatcher, but it is. And these birds are primarily, most of their range is in Uruguay, and the range bleeds a little bit into Brazil and this one little corner of Argentina, and that's it. So I was really happy to see this bird. And of course, fairly common bird, but also highly threatened due to destruction of marshlands, is the scarlet-headed blackbird. And this is a really large blackbird. It's basically a grackle size, and it's just spectacular that the red, the camera cannot capture how bright and iridescent the red is. It's just a wonderful bird. And this region of South America has the basically the center for blackbird family diversity in the world. Lots of blackbirds, a few, not much in the way of orioles, but just tons and tons of blackbirds and meadowlarks, etc. And one of the fancy birds that you see walking around, sometimes even with chickens next to houses, is the giant wood rail. And it's a pretty large bird, and it's walks around out in the open often, unlike most other rails. And as opposed to the rufous-sided crake, the first one I've ever seen in my life. I've heard many in many different countries in South America, and the first one I get to see. And of course, that stick is in the way, but at least you can see what most of the bird looks like. Notice how long the toes are for walking on the lily pads and on the emergent vegetation. And we did see quite a few really cool mammals, but I wouldn't have time to really discuss them all. But this is my favorite, the dwarf hairy porcupine. And that long tail is actually prehensile. It's actually a fourth leg, and it can wrap around tree limbs, etc., and swing around like a monkey. And just a cute little animal. It's another marsh bird, the yellow-rumped. It's also in the blackbird family. And in the grasslands, we have the strange-tailed tyrant, another flycatcher. And there's a lot of flycatchers in this area, which are really unusual. They look completely different from the flycatchers we have in North America. And I'm going to do a talk one of these days on the crazy flycatchers of the New World. But this one is highly endangered. It's only known from a few locations in this area of Argentina. There's only a few locations in Paraguay and in Brazil, but could go extinct with the current trend of burning down and mowing grasslands and converting to soybeans and or heavy grazing for pastures. So this is a special spot to get this bird. This is actually an immature male. The adults are the even longer tailed, stranger tailed, and a little more colorful, a little more black and white. Another really cool bird, not the upper one is a gray monjita, but the two below are saffron-cowled blackbirds, also highly endangered species, only known from a few locations in Argentina and Paraguay. And just brilliant bird, and associated with wet grasslands near marshes. Another fancy flycatcher is a streamer-tailed tyrant. It's the largest flycatcher in the world, and just a gorgeous bird. Often see them in little groups, probably family groups, and there are 5 or 6 of these in this one little area. Again, it's not quite as endangered as the other species, but still declining in its range due to habitat loss. And this is another flycatcher, if you can believe it. It's called a bearded tachuri. And as with the other birds, it's a grassland, brushland bird that's highly endangered. Little pockets of populations are scattered around. There's, I think, 1 or 2 populations, tiny little populations in Paraguay. There's a few in this area, and there's some in Brazil. There's even some in Guyana. In southern Guyana, there's a savanna grassland, and they're in there as well. One of my favorite birds of the trip is the ochre-breasted pipit. And again, it is highly endangered, only found in these native grasslands, very sparsely distributed with little patches. And when you look at in the field guides, they just show, the ochre-breasted looks like any other, pipit, just kind of this brown and white thing. But to see it in real life, those brilliant golden hues, it was just breathtakingly beautiful bird. It really reminds me of a LeConte sparrow or a Nelson sparrow, bright North American marsh sparrows and grassland sparrows. Just brilliant bird. And little flavor is this white woodpecker, just gorgeous thing. This was in around the grasslands we went to. It's all a private property, and a lot of areas are preserved as for nature by the landowner. And the landowner is 3rd generation from Scotland, and his great-grandfather came. He was a RAF pilot in World War I. And after the World War I ended, he just had to leave, and he moved to Argentina, and created this big estancia. And around the houses, you have these really large trees, because of course they planted interesting trees back over 100 years ago. And this white woodpecker is there. So we then traveled north and into that rainforest that I mentioned, and right on the border with Brazil and Paraguay and Argentina is the Iguazu Falls, which is the most spectacular falls on the planet. This is from the Argentine side. There's only a little fraction of the total area of falls, and it's just a spectacular place. And of course, it's rainforest and full of birds and wild animals, including jaguar. And it's a really well run. It's a national park on each side. Brazil has a national park on one side and Argentina on the other. And they get lots and lots of tourists. The infrastructure is excellent, and the management is really top notch. It's a world-class location for tourism, and it's just wonderful. And so here's what some of the forest looks like. This is kind of a shorter forest. It's kind of a swampy area. And notice we all wearing coats. We were there in the austral summer in June, and it was cold. Even in even in this tropical rainforest, it would get down into the 30s at night, sometime even into the 20s, and it would be warm up into maybe 50 degrees or so. At one occasion, we got to 70 degrees, but most of the time it was cold. And one of the really special birds in this region is a vinaceous-breasted parrot. There's only 400 left on the planet, and we had a flock of 20 or so, 30 in these trees, and captured for the pet trade, and also loss of habitat. And there's a population in this area in Argentina and a few left in Brazil, and that's it. One of the really cool birds in this forest is the large-tailed antshrike. It's actually a really big antshrike, really long. It's almost mockingbird size, maybe even bigger. And I just love the pattern, the coloration. Extremely difficult bird to see, easy to hear them calling, and they always hide in the middle of vegetation, never come within 2 or 3 layers of vegetation to you. So I was very lucky to get the photo of this bird. A bird that biologists think will probably go extinct in the next 20, 30 years is the saffron toucanet. Again, this is a forest bird. It's unique among all the toucans and toucanets. Nothing in its family looks like this bird at all. One of the names is the flying banana. It's yellow, and they're found in rainforests, and the few rainforests that are left in Brazil and Argentina, and even in existing rainforests, their populations are declining, and they're actually being extirpated from different forest patches. So they don't understand why necessarily it is declining, because there is forest for them, but it is. So if you want to see it, you better go now. We do often look for night birds, and this is a long-tailed nightjar in a spotlight at night. Beautiful bird, and it's in the hornbill family, nighthawks. And this is actually an immature male. The tail of an adult is even much longer than this, if you can believe it. This is another bird that's fairly limited distribution, highly endangered through loss of habitat. Very, very small distribution is the white-bearded antshrike. And this is a lifer for me on this trip. I was really happy to see it. Of course, there are some really cool birds like this red-ruffed fruit crow, and they're fairly common in these forests. And there's another population in the Andes from Colombia down into Peru. I don't think they get to Bolivia. And I know the Peruvian population is highly endangered, and they're been extirpated from, or they're gone from Ecuador. And you can see them in certain areas in Colombia where they're still around. But the ones in the Andes have that red, comes all the way down into the belly. And these southeastern South American birds are just red around the throat and upper chest. So they're probably different species that have highly disjunct ranges. There's no gene flow between them. So I don't know why they are regarded as the same species. But there you have it. Another really special night bird is the long-tailed potu. And a friend of mine whose family owns a hummingbird lodge in Puerto Iguazu in Argentina, on the Argentina side of the falls, found this bird. It's the first record for Argentina. And once he found this, and I think Kevin Zimmer found one on the Brazil side. And so pretty special bird. So we went out and saw this one. There are a few in this one area, not just one, but there's a little population. But fairly big bird, much bigger than the common potu or northern potu. And one of my favorite birds is a rufous cap motmot. And if you know motmots, they always have that little pendulum at the tip of the tail. And rufous cap is one of the 3 motmots that does not have that. They don't do that. And this is an endemic species to southeastern Brazilian forests in this one little area of Argentina and adjacent Paraguay. And with 97% of the forest lost in this region, it's much lower population than formerly, and just hanging on in these forest patches. And I had to throw this in. It's just a cool bird. This is a juvenile ornate hawk eagle, the little crest. All right, so from there we flew all the way across Argentina to the Andean foothills. And this region of the Andes is called the Yungas. And this is a Yungas cloud forest, which is actually fairly low elevation. And the cloud forest further north is really high, especially if you go to the equator outside of Ecuador. I mean, in Ecuador, outside of Quito, the cloud forest starts probably around 9,000 feet, 8,000 feet, maybe a little bit lower. And here we're maybe 1,000 feet of elevation, if that. So it's a latitudinal change. And so a pretty interesting forest, lots of really cool birds, including the fulvous-headed brush finch. A lot of these birds are endemic to the Yungas region, which is extends from this one little corner, very tip of northwestern Argentina, gets into Bolivia a bit, sometimes into central Bolivia. Some species extend that far, but some species are only found in the Argentina side, so tiny distribution. And one of them is, with a tiny distribution, is the rufous-throated dipper. And very few streams, and really special bird. There are only, I think, 5 species of dippers in the world, and this is the most range-restricted one of all. You see a leg band, a metal band on the one leg. They're all being monitored by scientists. And another really special bird that's also very highly range restricted to this Yungas cloud forest is the red-faced guan. And it took 2 attempts to find it. We didn't see it the first day, but as we came back down the mountain a few days later, we did get this great look. And guans are large. They're related to turkeys, and so they're hunted and provide a lot of meat, good eating. And so when you get to areas where they're not protected, they're usually extirpated. So this is in a national park. Oops. A bird that I've been looking for decades in the Andes is the Andean sharp-tailed stream creeper. There is another stream creeper, sharp-tailed stream creeper in southeastern Brazil in the Iguazu area of Argentina that we were just at, but it's different. It has it's much whiter below and has a big white superciliary. And there's probably no gene flow between the two subspecies, highly disjunct ranges, and I don't see why they're regarded as the same species. But the one in the lowlands in Brazil and Argentina are very common, very easy to see. The ones in the Andes are really rare and very difficult to see. So this is a very special bird for me. And brown-capped redstarts are pretty common, just gorgeous bird. It's in the warbler family. And this is one of the range-restricted hummingbirds, only found in this one little area of the Yungas, the blue-capped puffleg. So in this area, if you go down, drop down a little bit in elevation, and in the flat areas, you get into the Chaco ecoregion, which extends from central Paraguay west into Argentina and north and a little bit into Bolivia, and that's it. And so there's a whole suite of species which are Chaco specialists. And this is one of them. This is a black-legged Seriema. And Seriema is a really interesting family. There are two species in the world. One's a black-legged and the other is a red-legged. The red-legged is also here in this area, but they have a really wide distribution into going all through the brushlands and grasslands of Brazil down into central Argentina, and very widespread. And where the black-legged is very difficult to see and very small distribution. So we're lucky to get this bird. And it's one of my favorite photos of all time, a gray-cowled wood rail. And mossback sparrow. This is a really beautiful bird. This is a Yungas specialty. And the Tucumán parrot. This is a highly endangered species. There were tens of thousands were captured and sent off to Europe and United States and elsewhere in the pet trade. And they were pretty much wiped out of most of its range. And so the CITES listed as rare and endangered, and it's now illegal to capture them and export them. So there's hope that maybe we can save this species, and a large percentage of the world's population comes to roost in this artificial pine plantation in this one little town out in the middle of nowhere. And just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them all come in to roost at night. So we got there before dusk, and we witnessed just these huge flocks of birds coming in, making lots and lots of noises. And it was just a fantastic experience. Another really cool bird is the yellow-collared macaw. It used to be called golden-collared, and I like golden-collared better, but yellow-collared macaw. It's a small macaw. And the Yungas dove specialty, Yungas pygmy owl. Red-tailed comet is actually an immature male. The adult male will have a much longer tail and be bright iridescent green on the chest and throat and belly. But this is the only one I can get a photo of, unfortunately. Another really fancy bird is a giant ant shrike, size of a Steller's jay. This is the male. This is the female. Very difficult birds to see. We're really lucky to get this female to come out in the open, and just fancy thing. There's also a lifer for me, one of my most wanted birds. So in this area, we went up a little bit higher elevation in this little isolated mountain range. It's not connected to the Andes. It's just a little bit to the east of the Andes. And we had to take us 4-wheel drives up this basically the river, rocky and boulder strewn river, to get up in this area. And it was pretty neat. We got this amazing white-browed tapaculo of the subspecies. It was only known from this little isolated mountain range. And we actually think it's a species now because it did not respond to calls or songs of the main subspecies, which is in the southern Andes. It would only respond to calls from this local population, which is a really good indicator that's a distinct species. For tapaculos are extremely difficult to see. You can hear them often, but seeing them is very, very rare. So this, in fact, I got this photo is one of the highlights of my birding days. It was pretty amazing. I think we're all incredibly blown away, including the Argentine guide. And this is another bird which is endemic to this one little area of Argentina, the yellow-striped brush finch. Found it up in this forest. Okay. So we started ascending from the Yungas cloud forest up into the Andes, and it got drier and drier. We actually went through desert with cacti, lots of big cacti all over, and desert birds. And then this is the highest elevation we got to. You can see snow and ice. We were about 15,000 feet, looking for some really, really special birds, like the citron-headed yellowfinch, the bare-eyed ground dove, which is only known from a few little locations in Argentina, nowhere else on the planet. Critically endangered, tiny population. And they're often found around villages. That's probably where the food is for them, grains, etc. So we went to this little village and looked down, and here this bird was. Black-hooded Sierra finch is a kind of widespread species, but beautiful. And variable hawk, it's a nice photo. Bird flew in. Just brilliant patterning. And up at the highest elevation in these bogs, we had the diadem sandpiper plover, which I looked for in the best location to find them in Peru 4 separate times and missed them each time at over 16,500 feet. And so I was really fortunate and really happy to finally see one. But it was a juvenile, so not quite as bright and brilliantly colored as the adult, but still a really amazing bird. They're only found in these little bogs at super high elevation. And another bird that's only at the highest elevation is red-backed Sierra finch. And yeah, we almost missed this bird, but we got it. There's also a very small distribution as well. And then around a little bit lower but still high elevation, we found some marshes and lakes, and the giant coot is a prominent member of that avifauna there. The Andean lapwing. And there's another mammal, the vicuña. This is a ancestor to the llama. Llamas are basically domesticated vicuñas, but look very different now, much thicker. All right, so from there, we flew all the way back down to Buenos Aires and the coast. And this is the marshlands, amazing marshlands. And on the coast itself, we saw snowy sheathbill, which is a subantarctic species and Antarctic species, and a few of them winter as far north as Buenos Aires area on the beaches. And they eat carrion. They eat dead from dead marine mammals and seals and birds. And it's Cusco robus swan. You can tell from our swans because it has a big duck bill, but it's just like this giant white duck. And a bird that I was shocked to see flying around in the surf was black-browed albatross. This is an immature. We also had an adult. And in the marshes itself is another flycatcher, a crazy flycatcher, the many-colored rush tyrant. It actually has some red on it on the under tail coverts. And the Spanish name is the seven-colored bird. And southern screamer. Screamers are unique birds. There are three species. There's the southern screamer, the northern screamer in northern Colombia, and then the horn screamer in Amazonia. And they're really big. They have long wingspans, about the length of a turkey vulture, and they'll soar up. They can soar, and they're called. You can hear them from miles away as they're soaring and calling. They're related to geese, if you can believe it, and they have these big spurs on their wings that they use in fighting. They don't have webbed feet either, and it's just a really strange bird. And this is one of the grassland shorebirds, the tawny-throated dotterel, which is my favorite birds. And in this area, you have the black-headed duck, which is a fairly rare bird to find. You have to go to a few marshes to get them. And this is the best look I've ever had one in my life. Was at this place. And the red shoveler. There's all the ducks down there are different from ours. Quite a few species. And black-necked swan, fancy bird. And to get back to sort of the rarer ones or limited distribution, this is the olrogs, which is only known from the area around Buenos Aires and the immediate coast. And that's it. It's a tiny distribution. These are adults. And then finally, the Hudson's Canastera, which I missed on my previous trip to the Buenos Aires area 12 years ago. And this is the bird I really, really wanted. And again, it's a highly endangered grassland marshland bird, or grassland bird, wet grassland bird. And we got to an area and got to see this one, get photos. Okay, so goodbye, Argentina. And hello, Bolivia. So I better get moving because it's 7:45 already. All right. So the Reserva Barba Azul. Barba Azul means bluebeard. And here's it's basically where we went in Bolivia. Santa Cruz, sort of right in here, is the major city. It's the largest or second largest city in Bolivia. And then up here, we flew from there up north to this area, Trinidad, that one little red spot. That's a Barba Azul reserve. We had to take small plane flights to get to that reserve. It's a little landing strip, and there's a lodge and research station there. And then the rest of the trip, we just basically went down a little bit, and then we went up this one highway, up the mountains into the high country, high elevations in La Paz area. So that's kind of a standard route where a lot of the tours go. Most tours do not go to the Barba Azul area. They just do that, keep to the road and go up the hill from Santa Cruz. So this is the Barba Azul area. There's grassland, and going back to the theme, grassland birds and native grasslands is very rare in South America, and probably actually very rare anywhere in the world. And it's a really nice forest. This is kind of the interface between the Chaco and the Amazon. So you get kind of a little Amazonia effect with these patches of forest, but not nearly as species rich as in Amazonia itself. And here we are going off in the grass. And there's a lot of water. We take a boat and look for water birds here. That's the lodges and the little cabins in the forest. And one of the common birds here was the blue and yellow macaw, hundreds of them, and very striking, loud. And here's one perched. And you'll notice it has a blackish throat and has a green crown. And I'll tell you why that's important, because the Barba Azul is named after the blue-throated macaw, which is a blue crown and a big blue throat. You can see that. And these are highly endangered. There's only, they think there may be 300 or 400 left on the planet. And over half of the world's population is on this reserve. And it's protected now, supposedly protected, but of course poachers will come in because they can get a lot of money for these birds, but it's illegal to trap them and trade and export them. But really amazing bird, the blue-throated macaw. And that's why we went to this reserve, to see this bird. But there's some other special ones too, including the Orinoco goose, which are they're hunted heavily, and they're gone from Ecuador, in fact, most of Ecuador at least. I don't think they've been found in Ecuador in a long time, or maybe stragglers here and there. They're gone from a lot of the rivers in the Amazon in Peru and Colombia. So it's really neat to see them here, and they're quite tame. There's no hunting on this reserve, so they don't really fear people that much. And another special bird, pretty widespread, pretty common, is the sunbittern. It's it's the only member of its family, the sunbittern family. And they're found from southern Mexico all the way down to this area. And the Hoatzin, which is another special bird, only found as only member of its family. And it's an Amazonia only species, and they're always associated with wetlands. And they're a strict vegetarian. They have huge, I think they have double stomach, and they just eat leaves. And getting back to the rare birds, and this is another one of the weird flycatchers, the sharp-tailed tyrant. It's a flycatcher. And again, highly endangered species, only known from a few locations. And the even more rare bird is a cock-tailed tyrant. There's one population left in Paraguay, which may be gone now. I saw it there 4 years ago, but I've heard that they may be extirpated from that location. And then there's another, they've also been extirpated from Argentina, no longer in Argentina. So there's a few left in Bolivia and Brazil. So it's going fast, which is tragic. And this is a tiny little flycatcher, actually. The Chaco puffbird. I mentioned the Chaco habitat, that dry forest habitat. And this is endemic to that region. There's a little bit of Chaco in Bolivia. And the white-wedged piculet is actually piculets are woodpeckers, but they're tiny little woodpeckers, and they act like nuthatches, or not even like nuthatches. They don't prop their tails up and perch like a woodpecker at all. They just kind of hop around like this. So pretty cool bird. And this is actually a lifer for me too, white-wedged. Even the ibis are different down there. Buff-necked ibis, the grassland bird. And here's the other Seriema. I showed you the black-legged, which is really short legs. And this is the red-legged with that long legs and that really fancy hairdo. And this one is calling. The Bolivian slaty antshrike, which is endemic to Bolivia, and we saw it in the botanical gardens in the city of Santa Cruz. So from Santa Cruz, we went up into the foothills of the Andes, into the Los Volcanes Preserve, and this is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been on in the planet, anywhere in the world. you're surrounded by these incredible vistas, and every hour the light would change, and the colors and the cliffs, and it was just surrounded in this little valley by all this just majesty. It's just incredible. And here's our group in Bolivia, part of our group, happy. And because we got to see the Yungas manakin. And this is one of the Yunga species that does extend into central Bolivia. And there are lots of military macaws that were flying around the cliffs, nesting in the cliff faces. And excuse me. So I got to see military macaws. A red-headed woodpecker, which is related in the same genus as the ivory-billed woodpecker. A pretty spectacular thing. A black-capped ant wren, which is one I really want to see. I got photos of it. And blue-browed tanager, white-winged tanager, green-cheeked parakeet, and another tapaculo. This is, of course, endemic to Bolivia, and amazing to actually get a look and get a photo of this thing. It's just pure luck. Well, actually, not luck. There's a lot of persistence. And we did go to the little hummingbird garden where these biologists built the hummingbird garden, have feeders and lots of flowers and lots of species coming to it in the foothills of Bolivia, actually near the village where Che Guevara was captured and killed. In fact, a lot of tourists go to this area following Che Guevara's wanderings in Bolivia. So from there, we went even higher elevation. And when you go higher elevation, you get drier and drier and drier into these really dry desert valleys and area. And this is where the red-fronted macaw reserve is. This is another species of macaw, which is endemic to Bolivia. The blue-throated, as I mentioned earlier, only 400 pairs, 300 pairs, or 300 individuals, only found in Bolivia. And this is another species. Maybe 300 or 400 birds left, and so they created just this reserve for them. And here they are, just beautiful, beautiful. My favorite macaw, just gorgeous. And the underwings are just this brilliant red. This is during early morning, so that golden glow of the sun. And from above. And also, you can notice this cactus is a Bolivian blackbird, only found in Bolivia. And they're only found in these dry desert valleys and mid-elevation zone. And not an oak titmouse. It's a gray crested finch. And so when you get in this habitat, you got a lot of species which are only found in this habitat, because they have a very small range. And ringed warbling finch, Andean condors, and creamback woodpecker. If you know me well, you know I love woodpeckers. It's a fantastic bird, size of pileated. And along the cliffs, you have the cliff flycatcher, cliff parakeets, and a white-tipped plant cutter. There are 3 species of plant cutters in the world, and they're all found in South America. And for a while, they were thought to be in their own family, but they've recently, genetic studies have shown that they're in the Caatinga family. So they lost their family status, and now they're just another Caatinga. There's another woodpecker, white-fronted on a cactus. A little yellow throat. And warbling finches, going back to warbling finches, and some of the warbling finches are now regarded as tanagers. This is a Bolivian warbling finch, endemic to Bolivia. The black and chestnut. Rufous-sided. And my favorite, the rufous browed, just absolutely gorgeous bird. Another fancy bird is the crescent chest. It's in its own family. There are 3 or 4 species depending on taxonomy, and they're all extremely difficult to see, very, very difficult to photograph. And I got really lucky with this bird. The olive crown crescent chest. They really hide in the thick vegetation. They never come out, except for this time. And we all got good looks. Pretty fancy looking bird. Gray belly flower piercer. This is endemic to Bolivia. And from here, we're getting up into higher elevation, into cloud forests, where it's really wet and damp and cold, and lots of vegetation. And here we are in the high Andes above the cloud forest to see some really special birds. We were pretty high, this place, I mean, well over 15, 16, maybe 16,000 feet. And it was cold, almost a moonscape right here. Yeah. And then here we are in the just down slope from that spot into the cloud forest at 13,000 feet, 12,000 feet, etc. And just saw some really cool birds. That's why we're all smiling. And the road is called the Death Road. And it's called the Death Road because supposedly it's super dangerous, but there's very little traffic. And it's a really great bird for birding, or great road for birding, because there's very little traffic and it's just forest all through, and wonderful. But probably the main reasons why it's called the Death Road is during the dictatorship in the 1940s, the death squads would dump bodies off the sides of the road, and so there are memorials to people who were disappeared. They were all political enemies, and so it's pretty sad. You walk along the road and there'll be memorial to 20 people or so at different spots, and the names of them. And of course, the bodies were never recovered. But let's get back to fun stuff. Cochabamba mountain finch, which is right around the Cochabamba Valley in these dry ravines, and super small population and distribution, and just a fantastic bird. It's pretty large finch, and just brilliantly colored, just beautiful. Not a good photo, but I found this bird, the black-fronted ground tyrant. This is the first record for the state of Cochabamba. And so all the Bolivian birders were like blown away, and they were going to come up the following weekend to try to see this bird for the Cochabamba list. But it's also a pretty rare bird anywhere in Bolivia. So lucky to find this bird. And it was a lifer for me too, and a lifer for our guides. So that was good. We had lots of ground tyrants. We had 9 species of ground tyrants on this day. And this is a cinnamon belly. This is one of the more fancy looking things. All the others are pretty drab gray. And the glacier finch, which is this high, we were pretty high elevation here, and just gorgeous bird. And the black siskin. And we did get in some wetlands and saw puna teal, Aplomado falcon, and the Andean flamingo. And the Andean flamingo has got a lot of black on the bill, and it's got yellow legs. And the James's flamingo has a little black tip on the bill and red legs. Let's go back. See the difference? And so they're both endemic to this region of the high lakes in Bolivia, and a little bit into Peru, and some in Argentina and Chile. So it was really neat to see these. 2 species of flamingos, with Chilean flamingos, which are very widespread. So 3 species at one spot. Also at the really high elevation, the grasslands, we had the rufous-bellied seed snipe. There are 4 species of seed snipe in the world, and they're all found in South America. They're related to shorebirds. They look like grouse or ptarmigan, but they're not. And this actually, there's a population of seed snipe in central Ecuador, which is far removed from the closest population in central Peru. And they actually look different. They have different markings, and they should be different species. But there we have it. And this is about the size of a ptarmigan. It's a big bird. An Andean goose, a male on the right and a female on the left. Fancy, fancy. And canisteros. This is my favorite bird names, the scribble-tailed canistero. You see the scribbling on the tail. We did see about 8 or 9 species of canisteros on this trip. Most of the world's canisteros are all found in South America. And always a crowd pleaser is the scarlet-bellied mountain tanager, fairly widespread in the Andean cloud forests. But really special bird is the orange-browed hemispingus, which is only found in a very narrow area, elevational area, in a very restricted range in Bolivia. There's one little part of Bolivia in these cloud forests, and this is one of the birds I really wanted to see. And we got great looks. Several of them, just gorgeous. And hemispingus is in the tanager family. This is a blue-winged mountain tanager, and blue-winged mountain tanagers are found widespread from Bolivia all the way up into Venezuela, or Colombia at least. I think they're in Venezuela as well, in the Andes. But the Bolivian one is a little bit different looking, and it's got a completely different call and song. Really unique song for a mountain tanager, and I couldn't believe it when I first heard it. And it's probably going to be split as it's a distinct species. And here's another special bird in the foothill, in the cloud forest, the black-streaked puffbird. And the ochre-faced toady flycatcher is a tiny little flycatcher. And another special bird, which is endemic to Bolivia, is a hooded mountain tanager. Mountain toucan, I'm sorry. Hooded mountain toucan. This is the best shot I can get, unfortunately. Actually, I have 2 shots, but. And the white-eared solitaire, which is kind of widespread in the Andes in Bolivia and Peru. A beautiful bird, beautiful songster. And another endemic bird to Bolivia, only found in a very small range, is a black-hooded sunbeam. It's a hummingbird. And a chestnut-breasted mountain tanager found from central Peru or southern Peru down into Bolivia. And then from there, we went up towards Lake Titicaca to this one little tiny little isolated little mountain range right next to Lake Titicaca, and it's very dry, scrubland area. And it's the only place on the planet to see this canistero, the Burlesches canistero, tiny, tiny range, one of the smallest ranges of any bird down there. And we got great looks at it. And also right near there, we had the Waiko tinamou. And really special bird for me was a Hellmeyer's pipit. Another one of these rare pipits. And last but not least is the Titicaca grebe, only found in Lake Titicaca. There are a couple of little lakes where you can get them. It's a flightless grebe. Tiny, another name for a short-winged grebe, and they cannot fly. So they're stuck to whichever lake they're on, and almost all of them are Lake Titicaca. And they are declining because of fishermen netting for fish will accidentally catch and drown the grebes in their nets, fishing nets. Really cool bird, just magnificent. And good night with a southern screamer. So just kind of a little whirlwind tour of different places. I want to highlight the rare and endangered species and a little diversity of landscapes. If you want to see a lot more species, go to my website and click on the Bolivia, and I have another photo gallery on Argentina, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos of species. So that's that.
Well, thank you, John. I thought it was very exciting. Let's see, we have a question from Lynn. She'd like to know if you know the national birds of each of these countries that you're in.
Oh, I did, but I can't remember. I can't recall. Yeah. No, I don't remember. We talked about a lot on our trip, but I just don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Lynn. Let's see. I guess I have a question. Mm-hmm. The rufous cap mott looks a lot to me. It looks a lot like some of the bee eaters in Africa. Are they related in any way?
They're loosely related. Yeah, they're they may be in the same order, but they're in different families. But they're ecological equivalents.
Okay, so similar habitats and niches and.
Motts tend to be forest.
Okay, yeah.
There are forest bee eaters, but there are a lot of open country bee eaters.
Yeah,
it's a little bit different. They have thinner bills. They capture a lot of insects in flight. Mm-hmm. Motts eat a lot of fruit and eat a lot of bigger lizards, anoles, bugs, things like that. So their diet's a little bit different.
So they probably. Huh?
Bee eaters do a lot of. They look like they can act like swallows flying around. And here, motts do not do that.
Yeah, not that quick, huh?
No, they just sit around and watch them. They'll fly, but they don't soar or anything like that.
It's funny how they just kind of went to the same clothing store. Very similar feathering.
Yeah.
See, someone would like to know your website. I'm going to see if I could find that and put it in the chat. And could you look at see if there's any other questions, please?
Sure. Let's see. Joanne says, "Nice talk. Wonderful assortment of unique birds. Thank you." Let's see.
Here is the main website, which, John, do you have a link from this website to the other?
It's
sterling.com.
Yeah, it's there should be a everything's being
Dale has put up one if you look in the chat.
Oh yeah, that's it. So everybody can look in the chat. Yeah.
So smugmug.com, sterlingbirds, smugmug.com. If you want to get on my mailing list for tours, etc., Jay Sterling at Wave Cable. I tend to sell out my tours really quickly, but sometimes I'll have someone drop out due to a health issue or something. So sometimes I'll have a spot open up later. But the only one I have spots available for is Patagonia from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast, crossing Argentina into Chile. And that's going to be next October, late October, for 2 weeks. But I do have one spot just came open for Jamaica in January for a week. And yeah. And then I might have a spot open for Uganda. Someone had to come out of that.
Okay.
Generally, they fill up really quickly. But 2024, we're going to do Mongolia, Northern Peru, Sri Lanka, which is really a great place. I really like that place a lot. And there'll be some other tours, back to more Colombia tours, etc. So, and Morocco. But my last tour to Morocco will be 2024.
Okay. You know, you mentioned some of the national parks where some of the birds are finding some sort of haven. Is the government or landowners or any sort of level of government outside of the national parks doing anything for the birds whose populations are drastically decreasing?
No, but there's a group called Armonia, and they are a local Bolivian NGO. And actually, Sebastian Herzog, you ever know him? He was a UC Davis. No. He was one of the
founders. Okay.
Bennett Hennessy's from Canada. He's another one of the founders. And they do a lot of good work down there. They're the ones that started these reserves, along with the American Bird Council, other organizations with support from them. But Armonia is the kind of the local group, and they do a lot of good work with finding out where these birds are, buying land, building lodges, so that people can go actually see them, and generate some income to be able to buy more land, etc. So it's a good group.
Okay, great.
So, you know, American Bird Conservancy, other groups are involved, but Armonia is the group organization. So for that.
Okay. In the Argentine section portion, you had I believe it might have been called a sparrow, but it sure had the facial expression and markings of a zonotrichia.
Yeah.
Are there many? Did you come across many zonotrichias in your travels in the grasslands?
There are only four. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are only 5 species of zonotrichias in the world. We have 4 in California. You know, we've had 4 in Yolo County at once, and the other one is from southernmost Mexico in Chiapas, Mexico, all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. It's called the Rufous collared sparrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the only other zonotrichia. There are some other sparrows. There's the grassland sparrow, which is very similar to grasshopper. Yellow-browed sparrow, very similar to grasshopper sparrow. There's a tune-based sparrow, and the Yunga sparrow and the Chaco sparrow, which are more similar to some of the sparrows in Mexico. Maybe like a Cassin sparrow, but like a little more, or maybe like striped crown sparrow. So there are very few sparrows that we call sparrows down there, but they have these tropical jobs, pectoral sparrow, orange-billed sparrow, etc., which are brightly colored and green and everything, but they don't look anything like our sparrows. So they're different genera. So they're called sparrows, but they're not our sparrows.
Okay, thanks. I just have to hand it to you and your guides to find all these endemics and some of these rare guys, like the little, I forget the name already, the little puffy guy. You had 2 versions of them. Look like a little Pacific wren type of body. Yeah.
Oh, tapaculos.
Tapaculos, yes. Pretty cool name.
Well, you know what tapaculo means?
Yeah.
You know what it means? Spanish?
No.
And you know.
I don't. I'm embarrassed.
It's anus cover.
Well, now I'm not embarrassed. Now I am embarrassed, but not because I didn't know it.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right.
Does it have some sort of a covering?
I guess so. I've never held one in my hand, so I don't know.
I'm gonna research it.
So there's some more thank yous. And
on that happy note, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, well, John, thank you so much.
Sure.
I know you're busy, you're on the road, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us tonight. It was very interesting. Learned a lot. I don't know if I remembered if there's a text next week, but
we just go on my website and all the photos are there with the names.
Okay, an open book test, great.
Yeah, so you can
so
see everything. So yeah.
Anyway, so thank you. Anyone, last chance for questions, and we can let John go.
John, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's no questions, John. We appreciate it.
Sure, anytime.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Thank you for
Night.
joining us.